As we all know, that the Institute of Social and Cultural Studies as organization for over a decade now has been addressing the history as well as the contemporary along with matters pertaining to international relations, trade and connectivity through national and international events, publications and regular as a part of Institute's endeavor brings to you today's very interesting webinar on Descent of Afghanistan and its impact of India. The title says about the issue which has been a reason of global concern for last few days or almost a week now. So in this, therefore, we had to, organize this today's webinar in such a short notice because we really wanted to address this issue to know what would be the future of the country itself and with and what would be the future policies. It's a privilege to have such distinguished panelists. It's an honor to have Professor Ishani Noshkar from Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us and also supporting the institute in its all its endeavors and events and initiatives. Thank you so much for being with us. Amongst the distinguished speakers, we have Shri Alok Bansal, Captain Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation and Adjunct Professor, New Delhi Institute of Management. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us and also accepting the invitation in such a short notice. Thank you so much. We have Mr. Sultan Shahin with us, founder, editor, newsageislam.com. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us again. And of course, we have Shreyas Deshmukh, Research Associate from Delhi Policy Group. A warm welcome to you all. And thank you for being with us. And we really look forward to an enriching session. Now, I would like to hand it over to our chair, Professor Noshkar. Please take it over from here.
Thank you very much. At the outset, good evening and namaskar to one and all of you. And I would like to record the Institute of Social and Cultural Studies for organizing this, a very important issue, a seminar, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. Uh, Today, as as I start, I will just say we have a very illustrious panel to speak on this issue of Afghanistan, the descent of Afghanistan, and its impact on India. I will just make some very cursory remarks, which should hopefully set the tone. So, I think you see, Afghanistan has been known as a graveyard of empires, and the reason is that no empire, no power. If you look at the history, I think in order to understand international relations, my training in international relations has told me that we always must look back at history. We always have to look at how the events have unfolded over the period of time, and Afghanistan has been the best example of how history has taken a toll on what is happening in contemporary times. You see, the strategic location of the country, if you see, it has made it is as a both as a center for empires and at the same time a periphery for empires, and geography giving it such a location that it has been a both the country has been both a part of the great game as we have known, and also the Cold War dynamics leading to proxy war. But what has been setting the tone of the contemporary situation has been the Soviet period, as we all know, which gives rise to the militant form of Islam in its most radical version, known as where the rise of the Taliban take place, and we know how it has happened over the period. Now, the questions that actually are now bothering the entire world, perhaps particularly the academic community and the policy setting community, is that with the with the very quick taking of power of Taliban in a couple of days, less than a week almost, reaching to Kabul, and we now are talking about Taliban 2.0, and we're now talking about Taliban 2.0, which makes me wonder. It gives, a couple of questions that actually bother me, and I hope all the scholars and the speakers who are going to deal with this topic today will be able to, come up with some ideas and questions regarding, what will be the, the roadmap of the Taliban of the future. How does it deal with administration? Because as far as I understand, they have no iota as to how to deal with the modern system administration. And if Taliban 2.0 is something going to be different from Taliban's first phase, then how the roadmap will be set. We do see a precedent in the form of Baradar being declared, but we also have issues in, how to deal at the ground level of the reality. People are haunted by the kind of phase one kind of violence that we have seen. So these are the questions that would bother. And I think at the same time, there is an urge amongst Taliban to seek legitimacy. How it could seek legitimacy? Whether the people, you see the way the people are rushing out, trying to run away from them. Will it be ever be able to gain legitimacy? And if there is no legitimacy, how does it happen? Does Taliban have a soft side which will attract the people of the country and allow them to stay back? The rush to the airport, the mayhem at the airport will not take place. We are also seeing, even at the initial period, we were thinking that there is going to be no civil resistance, there's going to be no resistance at all. But gradually, to all our surprise, there is resistance. There are voices being raised within the country, both at the civil level and in the Panchi. We are talking about the Northern Alliance and, the Afghan army also joining in. So this is something that is very new. So how does it happen? Moreover, I think the most important thing has been whether, you know, uh, I think the coming back of the Taliban is a total failure of the U.S. policy. Many people are actually putting fingers at them, and they have their kind of excuse. They have their kind of saying. But President Biden has said, no matter how long you say nothing is going to be sorted, then what have they been doing all about Pakistan, about China? We know the Pakistan-China axis. We know they toe the same line almost inevitably. But what about Russia? You know how Russia is also falling into the game. There are other countries that are also showing a soft kind of thing, soft kind of alienation towards. How about the Muslim countries? So there are several questions that are haunting, particularly when we look at India. How are we going to respond? And this is rightfully a podium. I think these questions will be taken about, because there are three things as India is concerned, as my understanding goes. First is the question of the security of Kashmir. Second is, the overall threat of terrorism, because we are now thinking, or we are now dreading the rise of the Haqqani network, and now that Pakistan has got a kind of a leverage in Afghanistan with the rise of the Taliban, how it would happen, will it be a threat? And what happens, most important, the third point, how the amount of infrastructural, investment that is done in India. We still have Indians stranded. We just heard of 150 Indians were called, so-called, abducted and then again released. So there are hiccups that we are facing. Everyone is trying to actually make out A's as to what is happening. So as it's been introduced, we have a very, very illustrious and expert panel here. We have Captain Alok Bansal, the director of India Foundation. We have Mr. Sultan Sahin, who is the founder and editor of New Age, ageislam.com, and Mr. Shreyas Deshmukh, who is a research associate with Delhi Policy Group. I will request the panelists to, if possible, address these questions alongside as they speak. I will request them to keep their, talk to 15 plus 7, about 17 minutes, so that we can have more and more interactions. So without much ado, I will first call upon Captain Alok Bansal to please start this talk.
Thank you, Chair. The time now is 6:10. I'll take about 15 minutes to speak on the descent of Afghanistan and its impact on India. Before I come to its impact on India, we need to understand why this descent, why the actions have taken place the way they have. I have actually serious problem with this statement that Afghanistan has been the graveyard of empires. Well, this statement would only hold true if you thought that the history originated when British set foot on India. If you go back into history, Afghanistan has never been free of foreign interference. It was actually ruled from, Kabul was ruled from Delhi all through the Mughal period. It was a part of Mauryan Empire. If you look at Kushan Empire, it was actually the center of its territory, and of course, which included all entire North India as part of it. So Kabul, incidentally, has not been the graveyard of empires. This is actually a British construct, and which is, of course, a very belated realization. Unfortunately, Americans bought this British construct hook, line, and sinker, and that's why they are doomed. Why this descent, actually? And I just want to quickly go into this. What happened? Why this sudden chaos and why this sudden collapse? We need to understand that the elections which happened when Ghani came to power were not free and fair. The Americans actually ensured that Ghani became president. And all was well. The nation building process was going on smoothly till President Trump decided to talk to Taliban. And of course, behind President Trump's decision to talk to Taliban was his desperation to pull out troops from Afghanistan. In his desperation, they talked to Taliban, and of course, by doing so, they legitimized Taliban in an extremely hierarchical tribal society. Because in tribal societies, you talk between your equals. So by talking to Taliban, they enhanced the stature of Taliban. But at the same time, by not bringing the legitimate Afghan government into the fray, by not involving them in the talks, they completely sidelined and delegitimized Ashraf Ghani's government. Subsequently, of course, after the US talks with Taliban, they decided, after lots of to and fro movements, that yes, an interim government would be set up. One of the preconditions of the Taliban was that Ashraf Ghani should resign. The moment Ashraf Ghani refused to resign, there was a huge campaign against Ashraf Ghani. The US media started actually campaigning against Ashraf Ghani. His corruption and all those things were brought to fore. Not that any Afghan government in recent past has been free of corruption. Corruption has been endemic in Afghanistan. That's been the fact. The last nail into the coffin was when President Biden made his announcement that he's going to pull his troops from so-and-so date to so-and-so date. The withdrawal of US troops by no stretch of imagination was flawed. The US had to withdraw its troops. And to put the record straight, from 2016 onwards, the US troops were not actively participating in anti-Taliban operations. They were only playing a supporting role. From 2016 onwards, it was the Afghan National Security Forces which were playing the major role and countering Taliban. But if you go back into the history of Afghanistan, you'll realize that in Afghanistan, the regimes have changed, not because they were militarily defeated on the battleground, but because the key commanders crossed over. And Afghans have been known to be fence sitters. They cross over to the side which they perceive to be winning. And that is what happened after President Biden's announcement. As soon as Biden's announcement came, there was an upsurge of offensive by Taliban, which created that psychological panic which Afghanistan has been known to. And in fact, if you would have seen on the surrounding areas, especially on the border checkposts, large number of soldiers deserted and crossed over to the neighboring states. They crossed over to Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Iran, and even Pakistan to that matter. And then, of course, you saw a classic Afghan pattern of warfare which has happened. The commanders crossing over en masse to Taliban and others deserting their posts and disappearing. Now, the Taliban's tactics at this stage was, and which you could probably, looking at the way Taliban went about it, you can easily make out that Taliban were being advised by some key military minds. And I think I have no doubts that after President Biden's announcement, there were very, very key ISI and Pakistan military advisors with the Taliban. And then what happened was the Taliban, which already held sway in the countryside, started attacking the border checkposts. And they started capturing the periphery. Unlike 96 to 2001, when they could not capture the northern Afghanistan, this time they started with Badakhshan, a province which they could never capture from 96 to 2001. They started from Badakhshan and other northern provinces, Baghlan and all those provinces. And then, of course, they started capturing all the border posts. The border post of Afghanistan with Tajikistan was captured, with Uzbekistan was captured, with Turkmenistan was captured. Then, of course, Iran was, the border checkposts with the Iran were captured. Then Zaranj was captured. And then eventually, towards the end, Afghanistan government was left with only one border post, that was Torkham, which was under its control. So it was dependent on its supplies coming through Pakistan entirely for its sustenance. And Pakistan, as you know, was already backing Taliban. And it is at this stage that you started seeing the major cities falling into the north. And then, of course, you had Herat, Kandahar, and Lashkargah, which held on for a large number of days. It's eventually when the other cities fell and the psychological pressure became enormous that I think the troops started vacating these cities, and Taliban went ahead and captured these areas. Then, of course, the Taliban moved up to Kabul. A brigade commander who was outside Kabul actually surrendered en masse with his entire brigade, and the Taliban reached the outskirts of Kabul. It is at this stage that there was an announcement from Doha that our troops have reached the outskirts, the gates of Kabul, but we will not enter Kabul. After the announcement from Doha was made, the same day, that is 15th August 2021, the Taliban moved in. They moved in and captured Presidential Palace. They went into the Parliament House. You could see people with guns moving around into the Parliament House. Why was it? The Taliban leadership did not want them to go in, but their Pakistani advisors who were with them wanted them to go in. For them, it was very, very important that the Taliban moved into Kabul on 15th August 2021. The date was important. And please remember, on 15th August 1975, Sheikh Mujib was assassinated. It took India decades to reestablish its influence to that level in Bangladesh. And what happened in 15th August 2021, it will take India years to reestablish its influence in Afghanistan to that level. Now, what has happened? What is the impact? Now, as soon as the Taliban moved into Kabul, President Ashraf Ghani was persuaded by Americans to leave. And I think he packed his bags and left. Whether he left with the cash stacked, as is being reported, I still have my doubts. Whether he carried 4 vehicles full of cash that he stashed and took them in his aircraft, I have my doubts. It may as well be an attempt to launch a vicious campaign to denigrate him and delegitimize his government. In any case, he left. Taliban has moved into Kabul. We saw the mayhem that happened in the airport. The people are desperate. They know that this particular obscurantist regime, which is governed by medieval barbarism, will going to teach them a lesson. They want to get out. And the desperation was seen when people were clinging on to aircraft which were moving. And we saw people fall to death from 500 feet, 600 feet, with body parts frozen and recovered when the aircraft landed. It showed the desperation. Now, Taliban made certain statements as soon as they reached there. They said, we are going to have an inclusive government. We will allow women to work within the norms as prescribed under Sharia, as if doing a big favor to them. Ours will be an inclusive government. But the fact is that nothing has happened till now. They had agreed to form an interim government. They're not willing to form an interim government. They wanted to have Hamid Karzai on his own, along with Abdullah and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, tried to create a coordinating council. Not been recognized, though some of the Taliban leaders have been talking. What happens? What is impact on India? Before I come to India, I think Sultanji is here. He'll be talking to you about it subsequently. But I need to tell you about linkages that Al-Qaeda has with Taliban. We need to understand that Al-Qaeda has always talked of waging a global jihad under the leadership of Amirul Mu'minin. And that Amirul Mu'minin, or the leader of the righteous, was earlier Mullah Omar and today is Mullah Akhundzada. Please understand, theologically, jihad has certain prerequisites. But without going into the details of those prerequisites, you need to understand that one of the prerequisites is that you need to have a righteous leader. And the second important theological requirement of jihad is that you need to have a territory under your control. Please understand, the Prophet did not fight people in Makkah when people opposed him. He simply migrated. He migrated to Medina. But when Medina was under his control, he recaptured Makkah. So you needed a territory. And that's one of the reasons when Islamic State captured Mosul, the jihad that Islamic State intended to launch got greater theological legitimacy, and you saw a global resurgence of recruits who were willing to go and join Islamic State. Now with the fall of Kabul, the Al-Qaeda's jihad, which they want to wage under the leadership of Mullah Hibatullah Akhundzada, gets theological legitimacy. So what are the impacts for India? The first major impact is that because of this Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan coming into being, It provides a theological legitimacy to global jihad. You might see the resurgence of recruits emerging even from India to go and join the global jihad, as was seen after Mosul fell. You've had people from Hyderabad, from different parts, going all the way to Iraq and Syria to join this global jihad. You could also see a resurgence of that sort even now. Please understand, irrespective of what Taliban says, they have shown that assurances given by them, the agreements reached by them, are worth not even the paper on which they are signed. This was very clearly articulated after you saw what happened in Doha. They signed something, but the way they treated, despite all their postulations in the cities that they have captured, Herat and all, I have got personal accounts from people whose house were ransacked. The members of parliament who were there in the previous government actually ran away, and they just saved their skin just because they had escaped an hour or two before their houses were ransacked. Even now they are moving around with a list of people who they suspect were close to the previous government. So they are going to be vindictive. They are going to be. The second thing we need to understand is that the Taliban and its linkages with Al-Qaeda and their ideology, the ultimate aim of this ideology is to establish a global Islamic emirate. And this ideology does not confine Taliban's goals within the geographical frontiers of Afghanistan. So their aims are going to act as a hub which will radiate this ideology and spread it into different parts of the world, especially in the region as far as. So this will spread. The second factor which we need to understand, as I said, throughout this offensive by Taliban, one thing which has been very clear is that Pakistan and ISI has been supporting it, and they have been hand in glove. In fact, when Afghan Air Force targeted Taliban in Spin Boldak, the Pakistani Air Force directly came in support and actually dissuaded Afghan Air Force to get away. So now with a friendly government in Pakistan, at least for the time being, Pakistan will have respite on its western borders. What will happen in long term, of course, is a question mark. We'll come to it during Q&A. So Pakistan and its dreaded ISI will have that much more leverage to indulge in mischief across its eastern borders. And third and most important factor which we need to understand is that the foot soldiers of Taliban who have been fighting for over 2 decades are not going to start plowing the land just because Taliban has captured power in Afghanistan. They will only move out to newer battlefields in search of new wars. And some of these battlefields could be within the geographical frontiers of India. Could be in Srinagar, they could be in other parts of India. And this assumes greater salience because according to some of these jihadi outfits, India is a part of Khorasan, where end of time battles are to be fought, for which Al-Qaeda has relocated itself all the way from Arabian Peninsula to Afghanistan and Pakistan. So we have an issue to be. Government of India has an immediate crisis in hand because we have Indian citizens and we need to communicate with Taliban so that these citizens and our friends can come out of Afghanistan. That's what we are doing. First Vice President Amrullah Saleh has declared himself as the president because Ashraf Ghani has absconded, and constitutionally he represents the government. Most of the Afghan missions abroad have already recognized Amrullah Saleh and they have actually put Amrullah Saleh's photograph. But his resistance is confined at the moment to Panjshir. They have started moving there. They have moved into Parwan province and captured its capital, Charikar. Now today, they have captured 3 districts in Baglan province. But it is still a minuscule resistance. Unlike 96 to 91, when Taliban was overwhelmingly Pashtun, this time, though having a Pashtun majority, at the lower level, there is a significant composition of Tajiks, Uzbeks in it, though the leadership is by and large still Pashtun. So that is one of the reasons why northern districts were captured. Also, unlike 96 to 2001, when Northern Alliance had an option of withdrawing north and they had access to borders with Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, this time they do not have that sort of an option. The area which they control is landlocked and does not have at the moment any airport under their control. So it will be difficult to logistically support. More significantly, most of the Central Asian states have made some sort of peace with Taliban because Taliban delegations have visited many of these Central Asian states and they have been there from time to time. So we have a major issue in hand, and how do we deal with it is, of course, at the moment, Government of India probably has a wait and watch policy. which is probably justified in light of what is happening right now, especially since our citizens and our friends are still located in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bansal, for this very informative and very candid presentation of the hows and whys of this event unfolding. We will take the Q&A later, but I was a little curious about two things that has been, at the back of my mind while you spoke. One is that how is there a way to wean away the Taliban from the ISI influence, if at all? And whether the Taliban itself is a monolith, within the factions, whether there are sections, whether there is, kind of a gap of communication between the leadership and foot soldiers and things like that. But we will discuss this at the Q&A session. Now I would invite Mr. Sultan to please make his presentation.
Thank you. First of all, thank the Institute for inviting me. Are you listening to me? Am I audible?
Yes,
you're audible.
Just a second. I'm so sorry for barring in. Am I audible? I want to make a small announcement. After, Captain Bansal's deliberation, and I understand that this webinar is very, very important at this point of time. And all our audience who have joined and are joining over a course of time has lots of questions. So I request for your questions to be answered. Wait for all the deliberations to be completed. You can raise hands or text your questions with the name of the speaker you want your questions to be addressed, and please send to us over chat box so that our chair, as per her convenience, she can address it one by one, and all your questions to be answered. I know many of you have lots of questions. Please be patient. Okay, let all the deliberations be completed. Yes, Sultan sir.
Thank you, Ms. Kanpala.
Thank you. I would not recommend us feeling so alarmed right now. Like the government of India and others, we should also wait and watch, because I see some difference between, say, the Islamic State and Taliban 1.0, in the sense that neither the Islamic State nor the Taliban first government wanted recognition from the international community, or probably even needed, because Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, UAE were supporting them, and they had they had resources that they could command. At the moment, they are in a very difficult position. Their money has been seized by the American banks. IMF has stopped supporting them. And they do show some signs, like Hamid Karzai talking with them, Abdullah, not feeling in danger to talk to them, sitting with them, etc. Also, they have not shown the kind of indiscipline and what we were expecting, the kind of mayhem we were expecting in Kabul at least, has not happened. Incidents have happened, will happen, because no commander of Taliban, like in the present situation, can totally control the situation. And the cadre, they are fighters. And they have come from rural areas, and they have come for the first time, many of them, in cities. They want to loot and plunder, and that is something which they have been dreaming of. And at the moment, they are being stopped from doing that. One of the reasons why this is happening is that the Taliban 2.0 wants to create a myth about what kind of Taliban they are now. This myth has been supported and encouraged and promoted by clerics around the world, including in India. Pakistani clerics, Indian clerics have been talking about Fateh Makkah, that they have been likening this to the victory Prophet Muhammad got over Makkah. And also, you will know that the force that captured Kabul is called Badri 313. Now, what is this 313 and what is Badri? Badri is a reminiscent of Jang-e-Badr, which was the first war, the battle that the Prophet had fought. And in that battle, there were 303 soldiers, only 303 soldiers, ill-equipped, very, very ill-equipped. against 1,000 soldiers, very well equipped from Makkah, etc. That is the myth, that is the legend. And this is being promoted, that this has happened, whatever has happened with God's great support, because it was said that in Jang-e Badr, angels came down and fought on behalf of Prophet Muhammad and along with the Prophet's army, and things like that are happening. So this myth and this legend is being created, and they are being promoted in a variety of ways, and this will definitely have an impact on jihadi groups around the world. This has oxygenated them a great deal, and this has, really enthused them, and the radicalization will definitely grow. We don't know if the Taliban 2.0 will have the same kind of impact as, say, Islamic State had. Because when Islamic State, as Captain Alokji mentioned, after the fall of, in Iraq, when Mosul was captured and Khalifa Baghdadi announced his Khilafat, then you find thousands of Muslim young men from around the world, from 86 countries of the world. 30,000 people joined Islamic State in just 1 year. But the Islamic State ideology and its objectives, I think so far we see that are different from the Taliban's objectives as much as we can see from their statements and what they're doing. We don't know if they would want to lose legitimacy. I mean, they don't have any legitimacy right now. They are trying to gain some legitimacy internationally. But even after they have gained that legitimacy, if they do, and will they want to lose that by behaving in the same manner as Islamic State did, or as Al Qaeda did, or as the first Mullah Umar's government did, by hosting Al Qaeda and allowing them to attack America and so on and so forth. So we don't know. We should keep our fingers crossed at the moment, and I think that we shouldn't get so alarmed right now. But the fact that in India, we find All India Muslim Personnel Board's spokesperson is speaking and supporting, I mean, sending a message to this guy, to the Taliban, and supporting them and welcoming them, etc., is very, very dangerous, and is very frightening, actually, and what these ulama are trying to do. When Islamic State had come, when Khalifa Baghdadi had announced his Khilafat, then just one crazy Maulana from India, who is known to be a maverick from Nadwa, had written a letter to him addressing him as Amirul Mumineen, etc. And then he had also been criticized, although the ulama community did not criticize him even at that time. Even now, we find that though the All India Muslim Personnel Board has said that the Maulana who has spoken in his personal capacity and doesn't represent Personnel Law Board in this matter, etc. But there has been no criticism or condemnation of the Taliban activities and statements and whatever they're doing uh, from our ulama. This is very surprising that, okay, even if you are not supporting, at least you should be opposing, you should be coming out clearly and say what you feel about them. See, the women in Afghanistan, men in Afghanistan already are expressing their protest at great risk to them. I mean, you can imagine the women in Kabul who came out to protest, and in Jalalabad, etc. They must have known that they could get killed. All of them, they must have thought that they had very legitimate fears, and yet they came out and protested. So that tells us the kind of situation that exists in Afghanistan today. Afghanistan today is not the Afghanistan 20 years ago or 26 years ago, when in 1994 Taliban came, and when Taliban came, at that time, a lot of people had legitimately felt relief in the sense that the Mujahideen earlier were fighting among themselves. I mean, Kabul was in ruins, and everybody was disturbed and distressed, etc., etc. And then the Taliban came and they established some kind of discipline in the country. So it was natural for some people, at least in rural areas, even in towns, who had not known Taliban before, to feel relief and so on. This time, that is not the case. People know what Taliban did when they came to power first time. So they are opposing, and they are risking a lot in opposing that. Some and many are actually trying to just get away and go out of the country, again risking their lives in that process. But some more who know that they cannot go out of the country, so they are trying to fight the Taliban within Afghanistan itself. And in this situation, when things are not very clear, our ulema in India to welcome them and to not oppose them and to stay silent over their victory of this kind and allow this legend and this Fateh Makkah story and things like that to prevail and to be published and talked about in social media. Many Muslims are talking like that, etc. So this is very, very surprising to me also coming from ulema. I mean, you expect these scholars at least to be sensible and even from common Muslims. So the situation is grave, and we in India at least should be very, very much worried about how things are going, where things are going. As far as the overall situation is concerned, I feel that I find in fact that the sensible people in Pakistan, the liberals in Pakistan, the seculars in Pakistan are very, very worried because it seems to me also that even before focusing on India, probably the Taliban or the Al Qaeda or the Islamic State, whichever group becomes very powerful in Afghanistan, will focus on Pakistan first. TTP will become more powerful. It would try to maybe take revenge from Pakistan army because Pakistan army has been fighting with them for years now, and they have, I mean, their aim will be first to establish themselves in Pakistan itself. So probably more than India and other countries, it is the Pakistan which should be worried. And again, see, there are different strands, different things happening, multi-layers, layered thinking, all sorts of things happening. At the moment, we just can only keep our fingers crossed and think about it, as in a wait and watch situation, as several governments, including our own, are doing. And one more thing that I would just like to add is that there has been a lot of talk about Taliban being Deobandi products of Deoband, etc. This is true. They were students of Deobandi schools, and when Saudi Arabia started supporting them, funding them on behalf of America, etc., in the Soviet occupation times, they funded the Deobandi and the Lashkar and etc., this kind of madrasas. But one thing that we should understand is that Islamic theology, in terms of war and conflict and supremacism, exclusivism, and what kind of a state the world should have, and how Islam should dominate the world, and on these subjects, there is a consensus among all schools of thought. So we should not think that since the Barelvi schools or madrasas in Pakistan did not produce the Taliban, so it means that Barelvi thinking is against that. That is not the case. You see, from Ghazali to Shah Waliullah in India, you find a continuity of thought that Islam should be supreme, Islam should dominate the world. This thinking has been there as far as Islamic theologians are concerned. Muslim history is very different. At different points in Islamic history, we find different strands dominating, and different ulama have different views, and all sorts of things are there. There is no one point. But on this subject, that Islam should eventually dominate the world and the whole world should become Muslim and accept Islam, there is consensus among all theologians of all schools of thought. And this is a very varying thought, and this is what I wanted to apprise you of. Thank you very much, and if there are any questions, I would like to address them later.
Thank you you, Mr. Shaheen, for your talk, which actually kind of assures, but at the same time worries us about the future of the subcontinent as such. I was just wondering, since you were talking about some amount of voices coming out in the form of resistance, would you foresee any form of, civil resistance within Afghanistan of liberal Islamists coming together and trying to put up a more sane version and a more liberal version of, the way Taliban's are going, if there is some form of resistance? So I leave it at that. I will now like to invite Dr. Shreyas Deshmukh to make his presentation. Uh, and
Thank you.
yeah, I would request him to keep it within 15 minutes so that we can have the question and answers sessions follow.
Yeah, I'll be within 11 to 12 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for providing me this opportunity. Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank ISCS for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on the recent developments in Afghanistan. Before heading to the crude realism of geopolitics, I would like to express my solidarity with the Afghan people who are going through the trauma of insecurity and uncertainty. Today, I've been asked to speak on the role of two most crucial actors in this conflict, that is Pakistan and China. So prior to that, I would like to quickly share a few pictures and statements linked to the events that took place after the fall of Kabul on August 15th, just to provide some context to my analysis. So the first picture which you are seeing on the screen has taken on August 16th, where you can see the Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi welcoming the Afghan delegation at the Foreign Office in Islamabad. Next slide, please. Yes, here you can see the picture is taken on August 18th, where you can see the former Afghan President Hamid Karzai and other Afghan leaders, including Abdullah, having meeting with Anas Haqqani, who is the younger son of Jalaluddin Haqqani and brother of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the famous Haqqani group which you know. Next picture, please. This is the picture taken on August 19th, where you can see Pakistani ambassador to Afghanistan Mansoor Ahmad Khan in meeting with Hamid Karzai and Abdullah and other Afghan officials. So we have seen the pictures taken on the 16th, 18th, and 19th. Please, next slide, please. Here you can see the three statements. I'm just taking them for your reference. I'll just read it quickly. The first statement is by US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. He has given this statement when he was visiting India on July 28th, where he said Pakistan has a vital role to play in using its influence with the Taliban to do whatever it can to make sure that the Taliban does not seek to take the country by force. The next statement is by Pakistani National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf. He has given this statement on August 3rd when he was in Washington, D.C. He said the President of the United States hasn't spoken to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, of such an important country who the US itself says is make or break in some cases, in some ways, in Afghanistan. We struggle to understand the signal, right? And the third statement is by the Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. He has given this statement after the fall of Kabul on August 19th. He said that all attempts to alienate and scapegoat Pakistan for the Afghan situation have been defeated, and now the world was contacting Pakistan. You can stop sharing the screen. Thank you, Siddharth. So I've shown these pictures and shared the statement just to convey duality that in the narrative being built over the last decade or so, that Pakistan is the victim in this entire conflict, as the country has lost thousands of lives and billions of dollars in being the partner in the war on terror with the West, and the country's little to no involvement in how the Taliban functions in Pakistan. So I do agree with the initial part of the argument that Pakistan has suffered from terrorism. Definitely, they have lost so many people, billions of dollars, exactly. But however, the events of last few days shredded the latter part of the argument that Pakistan does not hold any power over the Taliban. And we have seen the pictures. Immediately after the Taliban takeover of Kabul, Pakistan National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf raised a question that why so far no country had made any statement against Pakistan. If these countries believed Pakistan was involved in the recent development in its neighborhood, that is in Afghanistan. However, it is important to note that the Chinese foreign minister has been in constant touch with his Pakistani counterpart, while Prime Minister Imran Khan has spoken to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and German Chancellor Angela Merkel yesterday. So my take is here, why any country would speak against Pakistan when their nationals still stuck in Kabul at this moment. Just to lay down the small chain of events, earlier in the first week of August, Moeed Yusuf along with DG ISF Faiz Hamid visited Washington for talks that focused on a negotiated political settlement in Afghanistan. Later, the statement coming from Moeed Yusuf indicated that the talks did not go well. However, on 6th of August, Faiz Hamid returned to Pakistan, and on the same day, Taliban captured the first provincial capital, the city of Zaranj in the Nimroz province. Then we know the rest of the story until the fall of Kabul within a week. Correlation or causation, I will leave it for the August gathering we have here. They can make a correlation of all these events eventually. According to the US estimate, Kabul would have fallen in 90 days, giving enough time for them and their allies to evacuate Kabul and Afghanistan. I may be reading too much into this, but even events suggest Pakistan surprised them all and India as well. The other circumstances which could have forced Pakistan to take this decision were the first, building pressure to control Taliban from the US, Afghan leadership, and Pakistani Pashtun groups like Pashtun Tahfuz movement. Number two, India as the president of UNSC had called on 2 emergency meetings on Afghan issue, keeping Pakistan out. The Chinese pressure over CPC related issues which have been causing delays in projects, as well as the recent attack on Chinese nationals in Pakistan. Internal economic issues which requires immediate external support to sustain. So these and some other issues could have motivated Pakistan to take rogue position in accordance with its national character. So what does Pakistan achieve from this instability in Afghanistan at present? Pakistan is now the primary contact for Afghanistan, and that's why world leaders, including China, have been calling on the Pakistani leadership. Number two, Pakistan is using its position as a bidder to secure other countries' national interest, which includes, for now, saving their citizens, and in the long run, maybe geo-economic projects in Afghanistan in lieu of fulfilling Pakistan's immediate interests and future needs of Taliban, which will help them to settle down and govern the country. Third, Pakistan may ask Taliban to target Pashtun nationalist groups which are supporting the PTM and other Pakistan-based Pashtun nationalist elements. So what has Pakistan achieved until now in last 20 years giving safe havens to Taliban? Number one, the issue of disputed Durand line is no more in the discussion. Pakistan has fenced the entire border areas. Second, I think Pakistan will not repatriate Afghan refugees as it is using them as a geopolitical tool since decades. And now with the Taliban on the other side, they may think of reworking of idea of strategic depth with the help of China. So now I'll touch briefly upon the role of China. As closest ally of Pakistan, China definitely would like to leverage on these developments. One, by getting security insurance of its geoeconomic projects in the region. Two, if partial security comes to Afghanistan in near future, expanding Belt and Road Initiative to Afghanistan, but they won't do it soon because instability is still prevailing there. Third, using Taliban to dismantle East Turkmenistan Islamic Movement and Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan terrorist network That network is already weak, but there still elements are existing in Afghanistan border area. Fourth, and the further reducing US and coalition military footprints from the region. So within conclusion, I would say the war will not end with the Taliban takeover of Kabul. Rather, this begins another chapter of instability. The insurgent group has not changed its ideological views, as my former speakers has said, nor try to convey the same, but its experience on the battlefield have improved enough to agonize regional neighbors. All the earlier estimates provided by the United Nations Security Council, reports and other agencies about the capabilities of the Taliban indicates that the group has not remained an insurgent force, but developed limited conventional fighting capabilities. Therefore, regional countries are pushing for a power sharing agreement but opposing the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Most of the regional states are in favor of the stable Afghanistan, but the concern is raised over the idea of victory of an extremist organization that could go on to endorse other terrorist organizations to walk this path in the future. However, the Taliban does not have the governance capacity which is required in today's modern world. Therefore, I think they may not sustain for long but will continue to fight to find its place in the Afghan political system. They are trying to bring existing bureaucracy on board as well as the other leaders like Karzai and Abdullah, which may provide some breathing space to them. We may see once again a proxy war and many conspiracy theories polluting the environment in the coming days. The conflict zone economy was already flourishing in the country. That will provide safe havens for extremist entities, which will raise the imminent threat for Central Asia, China, and India, and some other countries as well. After sheltering the Taliban for 20 years and now announcing a shift in strategic posture from geopolitics to geoeconomics, further saying, do not blame us because stability in the neighborhood is in our interest by Pakistani leadership, will not change the outcome for Afghanistan. So there is no straight answers as the conflict is becoming more complicated every passing day. But as other speakers have said, we need to keep wait and watch. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deshmukh, for your excellent presentation and giving us a very good idea about the states of Pakistan and China. I was a little curious to learn from you. It's the fact that you rightly said that the geopolitical tool will not. Pakistan is not interested in repatriating the refugees, but at the same time, there is now a fresh rush of refugees towards Pakistan, which I'm told that the borders have been sealed. So, do you see Pakistan now taking more refugees in to, enhance its leverage over Afghanistan and as a geopolitical tool, as you see its engagement? So, with this, we come to the end of three very, very excellent, very, very versatile, and very informative sessions. And now the floor is open for discussion. I would like the respondents, the questions to be, I would rather request, to put the names in the chat so that I can see who are interested in questioning. And at the same time, also, please mention to whom you want to ask your questions so that it becomes a little more organized. We have fairly about half an hour to have this interaction, so let's make the best of it. I have a question. It is not directed towards anybody particular. Ranjit Singh Chiang Mai from Thailand writes, if Taliban takes full power in Afghanistan, what could be the impact on Southeast Asia? Would any of the speakers like to respond to this?
Yeah, I would like to respond if it's okay.
Yes, sure.
What I was trying to say was that with Taliban taking full control of Afghanistan, it would legitimize jihad, Al-Qaeda's jihad. And as you know, Jemaah Islamiyah, etc., had owed their allegiance to Islamic State earlier. You might see that shift of allegiance towards Al-Qaeda. And you could also see a resurgence of jihadi activities even in Southeast Asia once Afghanistan is firmly established as an Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. That is my perception. Sultanji may have another view. I'll just want to.
Would Sultanji like to put his view to this question also?
I agree with Captain Saab, in the sense that it has already encouraged and infused a lot of things. Don't know yet if Taliban is established fully, and when and how things go, whether they will have an inclusive government as they are saying, as there are some signs of which Karzai and etc. And what situation will be there, how much they will involve Al Qaeda and Islamic State in their activities, will they provide them with territory, etc. We don't know. Pakistani terrorist groups already are there, they fought with them, so they are going to be there, and their focus is on India and Kashmir in particular. So we certainly need to worry about how they will go about it, what kind of support they will, where they will go. So as I said before, also that things are can be very dangerous for us. There are some very bad signs, and there are some signs which tell us that we should wait and watch.
Right. Uh, as the questions keep coming, I would like to carry forward the conversation and actually would like to know from you experts, is there at all a possibility of that Taliban and the Pakistanis would at some point of time have conflict of interest? Well, Captain, you may respond, and then Dr. Shreyas can also take over.
See, as I said, with the increase of radicalization, there is bound to be some turbulence in Pakistan. But at the moment, as I said, ISI is too deeply entrenched with Taliban. And at the moment, Taliban is also dependent on Pakistan because they need sustenance at this point of time. International community has not yet fully accepted their regime. And I think most of the countries of the world are on wait and watch mode. So at this stage, I don't think so. In immediate, there will be much of a turbulence as far as Pakistan is concerned. But eventually, you have seen even from 96 to 2001, Taliban, though under the influence of Pakistan, was not their stooge. And that I think no Afghan government can be their stooge completely because that is the history of Afghanistan, that they would not like to be a stooge of Pakistan. But again, it all depends because 96 to 2001, there was always an opposition to Taliban, which was existing in Afghanistan and which was fighting a war with them. So their dependence on Pakistan was far more. If that opposition also is extinguished, you might see a different Taliban probably. Trace.
Yeah, I would quickly say that in the last 2 months, we have seen everyday attack in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area. Every day, one or two Pakistani soldiers are dying in these attacks by the terrorists, may that be TTP or the cross-border attacks. So Pakistan would be more worried about these attacks in that area bordering to Afghanistan. And the second is today itself, pictures are circulated on Twitter where in the Talibani jailbreak, many TTP leaders have come out, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan leaders, and they have been greeted by the Taliban leadership warmly. And now they have been given proper support and everything, and those people are now settling down in Afghanistan in some areas. And senior leadership, I'm not talking about the cadres of TTP, but the senior leaders who established TTP in 2007. So that would be a worrying factor for Pakistan. But considering the geopolitics, as I said, it's a crude realism. Maybe Pakistan or ISI, as Bansal sir said, that may play out these people also in support of Pakistan's network in Afghanistan in near future and use TTP as well for their own benefit. So, to answer your question, I think there will be a conflict of interest if ideological interests do not conflict and Taliban and TTP join hands together. But if they work in favor of Pakistan, I think there won't be any conflict of interest in the future.
Right. There are many young scholars amongst the audience today. I would request them to make the best of this, opportunity, and please post your questions or your comments if you would like to. This is Ranjit Singh, who is once again raised his hand. So, Mr. Singh, please uh, come up with your comments or your questions, and please kindly direct to the person you would like to hear from.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yes, it is audible. I think the speakers can also hear. So please
Hello.
raise your questions, and it should be directed to
I want
somebody.
to ask question to Dr. Shreyash. If Taliban has not much experience to rule the country, then in between, do you think that the countries which are not friendly to India will take any advantage against India if India does not take any strong decision very soon? Thank you.
May I answer this question?
Yes, yes, Mr. Shreyash, you may please respond. It is, I think, directed to you.
Okay, thank you. This is interesting because in the first press conference, Taliban spokesperson said when he has been asked what is the difference between the Taliban of 90s and what today's Taliban. So he responded saying, ideologically, there is no difference, but otherwise, we are much more experienced than the previous Taliban leadership in governance, particularly, and the fighting. That's what he meant to say, I think. Somehow, currently, Taliban PR is working very well, public relation team. They are reaching out to people. At the same time, while they're talking to Abdullah and Karzai, they're trying to bring this former leadership on board, which is much more experienced in the governing country. At the same time, they have called on the former bureaucracy also on board, giving amnesty to them, saying, "Come on, come for the job, we won't harm you." So they're trying to establish some sort of normalcy in the country immediately. Second part of your question, that the other countries might help. Yeah, definitely. As I said, Pakistan is there to help the Taliban to bring stability. Today we have seen Karzai and Abdullah traveling to Panjshir Valley to bring resistant movement on board, to talk to them, their leadership. So with the help of, as earlier I have shown the pictures also where Karzai and Abdullah talking to Pakistani leadership also. So with the help of Pakistan, definitely Taliban is trying to normalize this situation. It is also in the interest of China immediately, as I earlier said. And Central Asian countries are also looking forward immediate stability in the country because flood of refugees, which is going to Turkey, also in some Central Asian countries. So they want stability immediately. I think I have answered some of your questions.
Ma'am, I think we have 3 questions in the chat box. If you may please take it.
Am I audible? I'm having a little bit of audio issue. Yeah. So, okay, fine. Yes, I can read out. I saw the question. I saw the questions. Right. Thank you. The first one is from Manav Agarwal. What is the likelihood of China's debt trap diplomacy backfiring in Afghanistan under Taliban? Would anybody like to volunteer to take this question, or should I shoot directly to anybody? Anybody want to volunteer amongst the speakers? Gentlemen? Yes, please. Yes, please, Mr. Deshmukh. Please go ahead.
Afghanistan is surviving on the aid since last 20 years, coming from Western countries, and other countries are also investing in different developmental projects. So immediately, I think there won't be a debt trap situation for Afghanistan because China is not going to take that risk investing in Afghanistan near future because there is no stability in Afghanistan. Recently, they lost 9 people in Pakistan, and we have seen its repercussion Pakistan is facing. They had to change a special representative for CPC, that is General Bajwa, had to resign immediately, and the new representative have been appointed. So China is not habitual to take the body bags from such conflict zones. So I think they won't take this risk immediately. They will wait and watch for a while, and maybe in the future. But Afghanistan doesn't have capacity to pay back to any other country in the future. So I think that situation won't arise.
Right. So the next question is from Suresh Anand, and I would like Mr. Sultan to respond to it, if you like. While the fall of Kabul is becoming imminent, should India wait, watch, and plan its actions carefully? Mr. Shaheen, would you respond, please?
Yeah, I mean, what option do we have except to wait, watch, and plan carefully? Because things are very, very dicey at the moment. No country seems to know what is actually going on, where this is going on. So we are all waiting for this dialogue between Hamid Karzai and Abdullah Abdullah, who are friends of India. We all know that. And Amr Saleh, that they have gone to talk, because he's also a great friend of mine, who is protecting and who has established, who is calling himself an acting president of Afghanistan, etc., and seems to be in a fighting mood. So our friends themselves in Afghanistan are at the moment, I don't know if they are confused, but certainly they are in dialogue and they are talking among themselves. So unless something moves forward, we cannot take any particular decision. I am happy that the government is taking its time and waiting, getting things clear. You see, when this webinar was announced and when you told me the date of the webinar, I had thought that by that day things will be clear and I'll be able to say something as to what is happening. But I find that even today I am in the same space where I was when you invited me, when you asked me to talk. But yes, things have moved a little bit, like in the sense that if, as Dr. Shaz told us just now, if Hamid Karzai and Abdullah Abdullah have gone and are talking to Abdullah Saleh, then I mean something is moving, obviously. As far as they are talking to Pakistan, etc., is concerned, I mean that is very well known that at the moment Pakistan has the upper hand, and all that has happened could not have happened without Pakistani help for 20 years. I mean, they have been supporting Taliban and in every possible way. And in a very decisive, because they had to defeat America with American money. so, so they have played a very, very difficult game and for a very long time, and they do have an upper hand. So where they want, I think that everybody, including the Afghan, at the moment, they just want international legitimacy. That is their first thing. They cannot survive without that. You see, even Saudi Arabia has not recognized them. Even Pakistan has not recognized them at the moment. Nobody has. And all are waiting. Even Pakistan is not, I mean, Pakistan has brought to them to this point. But even Pakistan is not recognizing them forthwith. So for them, the first thing, naturally, they don't have any money at the moment. So yes, there are some things that go in their favor, like China and Russia and Pakistan still have their embassies there, and they are probably in some sort of talks with them. Similarly, other things are happening. So we just have to wait and watch and see where.
Ma'am, you need to unmute your microphone.
Yes. Sorry. The next question is, which says, how do you view the future of regional geopolitics after the fall of Kabul? Would anybody like to volunteer? Or will the captain please respond, and the
I
others may
could
also.
not get the question very clearly. If you could just repeat it.
Yeah, sure, I will. The question says, how you view the future of regional geopolitics after the fall of Kabul?
See,
This is
we
by
need to
Namrata
understand,
Kothari.
as far as the regional geopolitics is concerned, at the moment, what we see is that Russia is tacitly supporting Taliban, and with Russian support, because Russian army is in Tajikistan, I don't think so. There is going to be a huge fear psychosis within the Central Asian republics. Pakistan is supporting. Taliban has been, Iran has been in communication with Taliban. But the point is, with the passage of time, you will start seeing fissures emerging. Because please understand, IMU, that is Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, is aligned with Taliban. So you will have some problems between Afghanistan and Uzbekistan as and when Taliban consolidates. The radicalization of Pakistan, which Shreyas talked about, TTP activities which are taking place, may pick up with the passage of time. And in fact, we have seen that when the radicalization increases, the TTP activities increases, which will start affecting Pakistan to some extent. And more significantly, while they may not have any problems with Barelvis or anybody else, but the rigid Islamic theology which Taliban adheres to, in that there is no scope for munafiqans or the hypocrites as they call them. So as far as Ahle Tashi are concerned, or the Shias are concerned, they are not going to be, they are not going to remain tolerant for too long. That you saw in the manner in which they destroyed the statue of Mr. Mazari in Hazarjat. So Hazaras are sooner or later going to be persecuted, and that might pit Iran against Afghanistan. So I have been arguing that in due course of time, India would have an option of again recreating an alliance between Central Asian states, Iran and India, and bolster up an opposition. Unless, of course, this all presupposes the Taliban continues to act the way they have been acting. There is a very, very remote but outside chance that maybe people like Hamid Karzai and Abdullah may exercise some control over Taliban. I'm not too optimistic about it. But if that doesn't happen and it is Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, these are my views, that in the immediate aftermath, there may not be much, but subsequently there are fault lines which will erupt and will create a problem as far as these neighboring states of Afghanistan are concerned.
Right. There is another question, which is again for you, Captain. It is directly to you. This is from Chitra Singh, who says, how India's strategic options in Afghanistan will change given the Taliban's proximity to Pakistan's establishment and the concerns that anti-India terror groups could occupy space in Afghanistan to carry out terror attacks against India. This is for you, Captain.
See, I have no doubts that anti-India groups will start finding shelter in Afghanistan. At least their training grounds will become Afghanistan. But even more importantly, it would provide a huge theological and moral boost for anti-India groups operating within India as well as outside. And in immediate aftermath, you will see some resurgence. As far as India is concerned, I have no doubts in my mind that we have to fight Taliban. Now, we have to decide where we want to fight Taliban, whether we want to fight Taliban within Afghanistan, or we want to fight them in Wagah, or whether we want to fight them in Srinagar. The option is totally Indian states. That's all.
Right. Okay, we have another question coming, which says, in a Taliban-occupied Afghanistan, will it be anyhow possible for any of the international NGOs to enter the country and do whatever might be possible for the girls and women there? I would request Mr. Sultan to respond to this, please.
Can you repeat that, please?
Oh, yeah, surely. The question goes, this is from Vasudha Vandapadhyay, and she writes, in a Taliban-occupied Afghanistan, will it be any way possible for any of the international NGOs to enter the country and do whatever might be possible for the girls and women there?
I think this is going to be very, very difficult, and the girls and the women there will, in any case, face a lot of problems. Maybe not immediately, maybe the Taliban, because of their own problems at the moment, seeking legitimacy internationally, etc., will hold back a little bit for a little while. But this is women treating women as kind of is their deeply held belief. I mean, and as Afghans, as their tribal society, etc., as well as from what they think of Islam, what is their interpretation of Islam, etc. So this is going to be very, very difficult for NGO, and that is why you find that most people related with NGOs, etc., are just get out of the country any which way they can at the moment. This is what they are obviously thinking. It will not be possible for us to live here. Because see, this the ideology that Taliban did to may be somewhat moderated because of international situation, political requirements, and stuff like that. But essentially, that ideology is very, very regressive. It is tribal in nature. It doesn't have. See, these people who have come to power, a few of them may have some idea of what international situation is like, what war is like, but most of them, and see, there are two groups in Taliban. One is the leaders, and one is the fighters. People who have actually fought for these many years, and they want now, their pound of flesh, and their pound of flesh includes women, not just wealth and loot, but control of women. So eventually, I find that I am very deeply worried about all the liberal gains that have been made in those years. And the one thing that I regret is that this time was not used for creating and for promoting a different interpretation of Islam among the Afghan people. Mr. Amrullah Saleh became very angry with me once when I said in a seminar that even Afghan madrasas, until today, even now, are teaching the same theology as before. And he said, no, no, there are no madrasas in Afghanistan itself. So you in Afghanistan, you don't have big madrasas like you have in Bangladesh. But whatever you call them, you may call them maktab, whatever, they are still teaching the same theology as was taught before. There has been no difference on that front. So these 20 years have been waste on that front. There no attempt was made to promote a different theology, which is available, which I, as somebody who runs New Age Islam, has been promoting that. We have been refuting their ideology day in and day out from every aspect. We do that. If you go to our website, you will find that. But I told Afghan leaders that you should at least translate our articles in Pashto and Persian, etc., and promote them in your country. Nothing like that happened. They just didn't care. So while international NGOs, women themselves did the best they could, and women in Afghanistan, like women everywhere, do want to come out of their homes and live a normal life and educate themselves and work and everything. So they did whatever they could. But ideologically, you see, the country has not changed at all. Their theology remains the same. There's not a slightest dent in that. And that is something I regret because these 20 years for me have been a kind of waste on that score. But I am deeply worried about women. Thank you.
Very right, Yusuf. It is deeply worrying. And with that, I'd just like to ask Dr. Deshmukh, in the context of what Mr. Sultan was saying, uh, what do you think about Afghanistan as a humanitarian crisis? As I was indicating, there's a huge amount of desperation to get out, people running over to different sides. It's creating a huge refugee crisis. How do you think the neighboring states, along with Pakistan, will respond to this situation? Your thoughts about it?
Okay, I'll answer this question quickly. At For now, in the last 2 days, Greece has built 40 kilometers of wall on the borders of Turkey to stop Afghan refugees in last 2 days. Central Asian countries has closed their borders. They have accepted few of Afghan soldiers who ran away earlier from Afghanistan uh, to Central Asian countries. They have been returned back to Afghanistan. Pakistan, it's an interesting case study basically on these refugee issues. There are more Pashtuns in Pakistan than Afghanistan. A. B. Pashtuns refugees have tremendously uh, uh, engulfed into the Pakistani economy. They have there is a more economic base for these Pashtuns who are living in Pakistan because uh, that in the last 20 years, Pakistan, some of the areas of Pakistani cities like Karachi and Peshawar and Quetta, these people are are part of that society and economically uh, uh, provided so much to the society in last 20 years. Then the third thing is currently Pakistan is saying that they will accept the refugees, but at the same time they need international support to accommodate these refugees in the economic terms. So Pakistan is definitely asking money from the Western Alliance as well as US and other countries in the region for accommodating these Afghan refugees who want to cross border areas. Fourth, this time there is not an open border. It was earlier in last three phases of refugee crisis in Afghanistan, 79, 95 and 2001. This time Pakistan border is closed. There is a fencing and they have built more forts and gates and everywhere. And in last 2 months, Pakistan has deployed regular military troops on the border areas, not levies or so these forces are handling all these issues. So they will just allow number of refugees accounted for where they will get the economic support from the international agencies. Only then they will accept these refugees. Otherwise, they will refuse them. So I think this time it is very difficult for the Afghans because there is no way out for them immediately. The small refugee numbers they can go to till Turkey and further enter into the European Union. That is different. That's not many of them. But immediately the poor people who can just cross over the border into the neighboring countries, there are no many options they have left with at present.
Right. So it seems that the refugee crisis is also going to thrive. So it is not only a geopolitical issue that we are looking at. It's not only a, a challenge to stability, democracy, things like that, but it's also going to erupt a huge humanitarian crisis to which the international community, I do not know whether they are really ready to respond, because we have heard stories about how it has been for Syrian refugees and Rohingya refugees. So this is going to be another story of refugee crisis and having a lot of implications as far as these humanitarian human security aspect is concerned. So this has been a very, very interesting and very, very enriching experience for me, and I'm sure that as time will pass there'll be more to discuss, there shall be more to talk about, and we shall have these very enriching sessions. All I can say is that empires have come and empires have gone. It may not be a graveyard of empires, but Afghanistan seems to have a resilience to some amount of stability, some amount of coming about of age. So this is going to be a learning lesson, and we all look forward to how the Taliban is going to work. It is extremely important for India to watch very carefully and take its steps very carefully, as India has always been. With these words, I will hand over the session to the organizers, and I ask Konkona to please take over as we have now come close to the ending of the session.
Thank you so much, Chair, and all the distinguished speakers for your enriching deliberation and also addressing all the questions. It was such a learning experience. thank you once again for supporting the institute, and especially, in this very short time, uh, you accepted our invitation and you kind of addressed the topic for today's webinar. As Madam said, of course, it has been a learning experience for all of us. I hope that, I pray as for the solidarity of its people, for the peace of the region. And today, we spoke so much about, from different angles, what the region is going through. But let's hope that, in the upcoming days or, in coming time, we also could, organize seminars and webinars which would speak about prosperity, development, and peace of the region itself. And especially, let's pray for the people during pandemic times, what they are going through. So thank you so much, all the distinguished panelists, the chair. Thank you so much, Ishani ma'am, for your support and encouragement in the institute's initiatives as always. Thank you, Shreyas, for being there. Thank you so much, Captain Bansal, for encouraging us and sharing your ideas. And of course, Sultan sir, thank you so much. With that, we are coming to an end. Once again, thank you all and all the participants who have supported us, being with us. Thank you so much for your lovely presence. Institute continues with its work, and in coming time we also have some very, very interesting and insightful events and activities. To know more about our initiatives, please scroll through our Facebook page. Do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To get a hand on this, today's webinar, please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thank you so much for being there again. A small announcement: we have an upcoming, a very, very interesting international web-based conference on Monday itself, on 23rd, which deals with Indian Ocean security and challenges, which is being participated by 7 countries with representatives. Participants who are interested to participate, please do write to us. We'll be happy to share the link. Thank you so much once again for being with us. Looking forward to your encouragement, support in coming times also. Thank you so much. Good night and take care.